comes from the Spirit with glorious light. Confident living cleanses my soul, giving the Spirit fullest control.
I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about mastering pain. And today what we're talking about is physical pain. Although we all have different times of emotional pain or mental anguish, what we're talking about today generally is physical pain. And all of us at one time or another experience pain, physical pain in our physical bodies. We are physical beings, and one of the things that we believe so strongly in metaphysics and in New Thought philosophy is that we live in our minds and not in the world. And so the way that we think about the things that happen and take place in our lives are of paramount importance. But as we change and condition the way that we think about circumstances and situations, we don't ever want to lead people to believe that we are denying the reality of these things. And so in New Thought, when we talk about living in our minds, changing our way of thinking, we're talking about doing it in practical terms, changing our way of thinking in a practical way so that we can deal with the circumstances and situations of life. Illness and pain are realities of life, and we believe that illness and pain do not have to have control over you or me or any of us. That illness and pain will be a part of our physical condition, of our physical and human experience, and that all of us at one time or another will experience some degree of pain and probably some illness. So we need to come from the beginning point that pain, physical pain in our physical bodies, is a universal reality. So many live with chronic pain. They have debilitating illnesses, sicknesses that cause them of their physical body to have suffering and pain that is ongoing and that never seems to end. In today's environment of medicine and the wonders of drugs, we have so many medications that can help people, but so often these medications also alter the mind and alter the mood and the emotion. We have a wonderful new area in this country that's being accepted widely, and that is alternative health, which creates opportunities for us to deal with the treatment of illness and the treatment of pain in new ways, using some of the Eastern techniques of acupuncture or acupressure. And all of these things can help. But the reality is that some people, some of us, some of our brothers and sisters, people that you know and perhaps yourself, may deal or may have to deal with pain either for a short period during an illness or for some people for their entire lifetime. And we certainly want to talk in the next few minutes about the ways in which we can master the reality of pain, not by wiping it out, because the physical pain has a physical manifestation, but by approaching it from the standpoint of your mind and the dynamic of mind. We believe that we live in our minds and not in the world. And so the way that we think about our lives, the way that we think about our experiences can actually change the way that our lives are experienced. The best anesthesia for pain is to understand that we have an inner choice, a choice inside us, in our heart and mind, as to how we're going to respond to this situation of pain. There's a story that's told of an older lady who lived by herself in the country. She had very little financial resources. She had had debilitating arthritis all of her life, and in her old age, the arthritis had become particularly crippling, and it had bent her body over, and she was physically changed because of the disease. She was in constant pain, and yet she was known to be of a fair and happy disposition and even would sing from time to time. And she had a garden that she loved to garden in and take care of her plants. But to take care of those plants was a very painful experience because it required her to bend and to stoop. And someone once said to her, "How can you live with the pain that you have and be so happy? How can you sing?" And her response was that I am sick and I am old and I am in pain, but I don't have to be unhappy too. And what she was saying was that in the midst of her life, she was able to find and experience some happiness. And the happiness that she experienced, that this lady experienced, was tending her garden. And even though tending that garden caused her pain in and of itself, She was able to focus on something else, and she was able to grasp on to something that empowered her and strengthened her and helped her to deal with the circumstance of her pain. So often physical pain causes our emotions to run rampant. And so often in the midst of our pain and our suffering, and this is also true of mental pain and anguish, but it's especially true of physical pain, that we sometimes and often become angry, we become depressed, and we become isolated. And when we become angry, when our emotions constrict, when anger closes into our heart and our mind, and when depression comes and when we become isolated from people, the negative experience becomes worse. The negative experience becomes worse when we allow anger, depression, or isolation to creep into our negative emotional side. And when that happens, there is a tightening of our psyche and of our spirit, but there's also a tightening of our physical being. A great example of this is the process of birth. The birthing process is a painful one. And in the process of delivering children down through the ages, medicine and midwives and women themselves have embraced a variety of concepts and abilities to deal with pain. Now, we know that the pain that is related to childbirth is a transient pain, and yet it is the same kind of a pain that those of us who experience chronic pain, arthritis and cancer perhaps, or other debilitating physical pains have to deal with. But when we go back to the issue of how it is that we deal with birthing pain, in today's environment, we know that there is Lamaze. What does Lamaze do? Lamaze puts in sync the spiritual being, the essence of our being, our mind, and our physical body. And by aligning these three things, by aligning the physical with the mental and with the esoteric or the spiritual, we're able to deal with the pain in a new and different way. Is the pain less? Probably not. But is the perception of the pain less? Definitely so. Is it of benefit to the mother giving birth? Absolutely. Does it help the child? Without question. And so this same concept can and needs to be used in all of our issues of pain, because as we put our mind and our body and our spiritual essence in sync, then wonderful things begin to happen. And an anesthesia takes place that is far better than any kind of drug or medication that can be given, because we know that when the medication is given, the pain may be blocked, but we also know that that medication can have effects on other parts of the body. Let me make very clear that we're not talking about not taking pain medication or not having anesthesia. What we are talking about is the ability that we have as spiritual and physical beings to master the realities of physical pain in our life. And we master it not necessarily by changing the pain itself, but by altering and changing the perception, the way that we think, the way we respond, and the way that we feel about the pain. Any woman who has delivered a child using Lamaze would tell you that the pain is there, but the birthing process is far different than one who has no pain medication, has no Lamaze techniques, and who gets in the midst of the pain experience. Because a woman without Lamaze and without anesthesia responds to pain in that way of constricting or tightening. And it isn't only a tightening of the physical being, it's a tightening of the mental process. And as our mind tightens, as our mind becomes brittle, it becomes sensitive and receptive to pain to a far greater extent than it would have been if we had looked at it in a different way. Just like that dear lady that we talked about with her garden. Is her arthritis any better or worse? We don't know. But the way that she responds to the pain and her choice is to be happy or to be unhappy, to be in the midst of her pain and suffering or to be in the midst of another process of life. That's what New Thought, that's what metaphysics is all about. That's what the fundamental of our religious and philosophical background is. That is that we can take the circumstances of life, and by changing the way that we think, and by aligning our physical and mental bodies with spiritual truth and with spiritual principles, we can master the pain and we can master the suffering. Thoughts make things. If you are in pain, or if someone you know is in pain, the worst thing that we can do is center them in their pain, have them fight the pain, have them endure the pain. What we need to do in the midst of our pain, physical or mental, is to deal with the connection between mind and body, to deal with the connection between the thought process and the physical outpicturing, as we say. And when we deal with that, then we can deal with the pain in a totally different way. Some techniques that are used in this, very basic and fundamental, the same principles that are used in Lamaze, the same principles that this lady uses, the same principles that you can use and I can use, and we can all become better at them. The real strength is those who suffer pain, chronic pain, and have it always, have the ability to refine these techniques, and by refining these techniques can change the influence that that pain has over their life. If you are willing to change the way that you think, if you are willing to change the dynamic of your mind, and if you are a sufferer of chronic or periodic pain, you can change the impact that that pain has on your life by changing the way that you think about it. Begin the process by talking to your body, by talking to your body, by focusing on the physical body as being connected to the mind. And so often we think of our minds as separate from our bodies, but nothing is farther from the truth. Our bodies respond to our minds. And again, I'm not saying that we just make the pain go away by thinking it away. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about mind over matter. There's a saying about mind over matter, and that is, I don't mind and you don't matter. And that's not the basis of this process. The process is to create an alignment and understanding of the connection between mind and body. The best way that this can be done is through visualization. A great way is through meditation and the changing of the thought process or the process of mind. Visualization is a very simple process, and that is exactly what the lady did when she went to her garden. It's exactly what we do in the Lamaze process, and that is by moving the focus of the mind from the pain or the experience onto something else. The lady who gardens moves her thought process to planting plants, to doing her work. She moves her thought process from the pain and the hurt into something else. In Lamaze, the technique is to move the thought process from the physical body to breathing. And if the consciousness moves from the pain to the breathing, and if we can get the woman to concentrate on breathing, and if the breathing process and the mind is concentrated on the breathing, it is removed from the pain itself, the pain is diminished, and the focus is shifted. The pain has never changed, but the way that the person thinks about it has. That's the key to mastering pain. The key to mastering pain is in shifting our thought process. The wonderful dynamic of mind, the truth of mind science, the spiritual reality of what we talk about is that God created our minds with the intrinsic ability to think of one thing at a time. Think about that. Your mind may think of rapid things in succession. You may think of many, many things, but you can only think and concentrate. You can only deal with one thing at a time. You may move rapidly from place to place, but the focus of your mind allows you only to be in one place at one time. If you allow yourself in mind to be in the midst of your pain, you will suffer. If you allow yourself to move out of your pain, if you allow yourself to visualize something, some people find techniques of simply closing their eyes, relaxing, which is one of the greatest ways of dealing with pain. Very difficult when we're in the midst of pain. Those of you who are dealing with chronic pain every day of your life know and understand it's very difficult to visualize something else. But you know that when you do, the pain is dissipated considerably. So if nothing else, help the person that you know or help yourself to sit in a quiet place. Become relaxed, become centered, close your eyes, visualize something that you see as beautiful, a mountain, a tree, a flower, the ocean. Begin the process of moving in your mind to another place. And when you do, you move from the pain into a new experience that empowers and strengthens you to deal with the pain. Every one of us are more than our bodies. Our physical bodies are from time to time going to create difficulty for us. They're going to create challenges for us. And we need to understand that by living in our minds, by connecting our minds with divine reality and the Spirit of God, and it doesn't matter what your religious persuasion is. It doesn't matter what your religious tradition, what church you attend. We're talking about some simple dynamics of mind science and the power of mind science to change the quality of your life. And we begin by understanding that we're more than our physical bodies and that our minds can empower and strengthen us to overcome our physical bodies. There's a story told of a little acorn that was in the ground. And this little acorn was deep in the ground and he couldn't see, and everything was dark. And as nature would have it, the acorn began to grow. He had no control over that. The acorn was held in the nutshell of his existence. And as he began to grow, he began to hurt. The pain that that acorn felt was tremendous. And it was growing and growing, and it was pushing against an outer shell that never seemed to give. And the days went on, and the weeks went on, and the pain got worse and worse. And the next thing that happened was the shell cracked. And when the shell cracked, it let in moisture, and it let in cold, and it let in all manner of things that the little acorn had never known before. And then days and weeks went by, and the pain continued, and the cold came, and the suffering went on. And then, as time went past, the acorn began to see light, which it had never seen before. And when it saw the light hurt its eyes, and the light darkened its vision, and it was in great pain because of the light. It was now in pain because it was growing out of the shell. It was in pain because the dampness could come in. It was in suffering and pain because the light was coming into its newness. And then the shell broke, and the pain began to subside. And then the roots began to go down into the soil, and a different kind of pain came, and a different kind of life came. And then the leaves came and blew over the little plant, and it couldn't see anymore, and it was in darkness, and it suffered even more. And the weeks passed. And then one day, the pain got less, and the plant became a bigger plant. And the days and weeks passed, and the pain subsided, and the acorn became a great tree. And in the process of becoming what it was ultimately to be, there was pain and there was suffering. And in the midst of the pain and suffering, as long as we, just like the acorn, focus on our pain and suffering, that's not going to change it in the least. The pain and suffering will still be there. But if we change our mind and our way of thinking, and when we get to where we're going, wherever that is, if you're dealing with a disease, when it comes to being over that disease, it may be the end of this life will have to come. But when we get to the point of releasing and letting go of that pain, something new is going to come in its place. And we need to know that the pain did not control us, but that we grew through the process. We'd like to invite you to pause for a moment of prayer and reflection with us. We believe that prayer is empowering and strengthening, and so we'd like to invite you to join with us now. Eternal and loving God, we're grateful for the pain that you bring into our lives, because we know that as pain comes, that great potential is born. And we ask that for those of us who are in the midst of chronic physical pain, that they be lifted in their thought and in their mind out of the experience into the radiance of a new and different life as they look at pain and look at suffering in a new and wonderful way. And we ask and do these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
Those were wonderfully helpful steps that you offered in relation to pain, and also the fact that you made clear pain is a necessary part of life is so very vital.
And I think so often religious people and spiritual people and healers, and certainly we do a lot of healing in our church, and we believe in the importance of healing. But I think that, and especially in New Thought churches and fellowships such as ours, we sometimes don't acknowledge, and probably the mainstream of New Thought would say, don't acknowledge the pain, because don't name it. But we don't want to deny the reality of pain, but we want to deny the power that pain has over our lives.
That's the important aspect, and that's what you said so very beautifully. And the steps that you offered toward with meditation and relief of tension and the deep breathing are all so very vital. And both you and I have worked with those who are ill, and we know that it's the tension that creates the major part of the pain. Now, there are skeletal reasons for people to be in pain, but as a rule, it's caused from tension and fear. And the fear brings tension, the tension brings pain. And then the deep breathing alleviates that.
Yeah. And so often, as you've seen with patients in hospitals where we go to see them, and when they're in great pain, people will even hold their breath
Yes,
because
yes.
it's almost a reaction, and we need to condition ourselves away from that reaction to a positive reaction. And of course, the positive reaction begins with deep breathing. And one of the things that deep breathing does is it takes the focus off the pain. We have to think about taking a deep breath. And of course, Lamaze, I think, is wonderful in that technique. And it's doing exactly what we need to do with our cancer patients and with our AIDS patients and with our arthritis patients and with those who have back surgery and back pain, because so many times the pain that we suffer because of illness or because of accidents, our physical pain, is going to be there and it's going to be real.
That's right. And what you said about Lamaze was so very true. Back when my babies were born, I hadn't heard of Dr. Grantley Dick Reed nor Lamaze, but and it was a very painful process. And then I was a surrogate father for a young girl whose baby was being born because the father was going to be out of town at that time, and so I was her Lamaze coach, and it was so magnificent to see her just give birth so easily. And in fact, she didn't stop talking to the doctor about relatives and medical school and so forth during the birth of the baby. And it was so exciting to see this baby be born so easily because of her Lamaze training. And it was the relaxation. And what is Lamaze? Deep breathing. That's a basic precept and concept of Lamaze, is the deep breathing. And that's what we do with meditation. And that's why meditation is so wonderful and so essential, as you pointed out, because it helps us forget the pain and focus on, it's refocusing our attention.
And the visualization, which we do
Yes.
so often in meditation in our
Yes.
church. And there's probably nothing that people who are dying that have called me to the hospital have asked for more than anything else than to have a meditation or a visualization. And I find that people who are suffering and who have experienced visualization or meditation know the value of it, and they want it so much
Yes.
because it does take them out of the suffering.
Yes, and it does exactly that. And part of it is the deep breathing, and the deep breathing is so important, and it's important for helping our memories. We can develop better memories if we do deep breathing exercises, and that's why exercise is so important. But we have to do the deep breathing while we're exercising. We can't just go through the motions of exercise. And it's the deep breathing, it's the taking in of oxygen and prana into our bodies and having that course through our bodies and do its work, that is so very important. And if we could just remember to do the deep breathing, we wouldn't have the pain and we wouldn't have the suffering that people have just because of tension.
And that deep breathing, of course, is a technique that we use often in beginning meditation.
Yes.
And most people, when they're doing meditations, begin with breathing exercises because that opens the channels and actually focuses us. It begins the focusing and the cleansing process.
That's right. And that's all the above. And it also helps us to relax enough so that we can get out of our physical body into our higher bodies and then just flow with the meditation itself. And if we're just thinking of our physical, then we're not able to have nearly as good a meditation.
And in the midst of physical pain, the worst thing that we can do is focus on the pain.
Yes.
And yet it seems that that's all that people can do sometimes.
Yes.
And I think it's very difficult. And it's a difficult and challenging opportunity.
Yes. But as you pointed out, the visualization is not, the focusing on the pain is okay if we're going to visualize it being transmuted, but only if we're going to visualize it being transmuted. And Dr. Simonton created the school where he proved that that was so very helpful, and they were able to cure cancer, and many diseases have been able to have been cured through the deep breathing and the trust that they would be healed.
Myrtle Fillmore, who was the co-foundress of Unity, used to talk in of course, her healing letters and her techniques of speaking words to the body.
Yeah.
And speaking words, especially to those areas of the body that cause pain. And that sounds so strange to people, but for instance, her teaching was that if your back hurts, then tell your back how much you love it and how much good it does, and send strength and healing to it instead of condemnation. And it is a process of mind that can be so creative.
It really works too. Yesterday I hit my toe very smartly when I was barefoot on the table, And so I started to just go on and ignore it. But then I sat down and held my toe and told my toe, I love you. And I'm sorry, I'm sorry I was so thoughtless. Sorry I did that. And then it didn't get sore. And I think it didn't get sore because I apologized to it for my carelessness.
Very much because you have supported it and nurtured it,
Yes.
and you sent to it healing. The other interesting thing is it has to do with healing, but is that you wanted to grab your toe. And
Yes.
certainly when we hurt ourselves, even as children, the first thing that we want to do is hold it.
Yes.
And I think that's a natural spiritual reaction because we know the healing power that we have of touch. And so often with pain, if we put our hand on that point of pain and then move our thinking into our breathing, into our visualization, and into our meditation, and then from the point of contact of our hand, send healing to that point of pain. And it isn't that the pain will be healed as much for this purpose, or this technique, as the pain will be diminished.
Yes.
So.
And it always will be diminished. Well, I hit that same toe 30 some years ago and broke it. I had to be on crutches for 3 weeks. And then about 2 years ago, I hit it again, and I was greatly incapacitated for 2 or 3 days. And so this time I just didn't want to take any chances. And so I think it really did work. I think that's why it didn't get sore, because it was the same toe that got hit every time.
But speaking those words of encouragement and blessing,
Yes.
and that's a topic that we could talk about sometime. Just
Yes.
blessing things, blessing pain
Yes.
can really help it.
Speaking words of comfort and cheer
Yes.
to our own body as well as to others is so very important and helps people relax. And anything that helps us to relax and to not resist, it's resist not
Absolutely.
is the key.
And by resisting not the pain and the suffering, we open ourselves to a more happy and fulfilling life. And Reverend Freelander and I have been sharing with you some ideas on mastering pain. And we hope that you found them to be helpful and that you truly are able to master pain. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of love.